Next up, we've got Evan Wong. Evan is the CEO and co-founder of Checkbox, a multi-award-winning platform that enables the transformation of regulation in software, all without coding. He didn't send me this stuff, he did send me one sentence just to say about it, but I have to do it anyways because it is really, really cool. Checkbox is smashing it. In the less than 2 years since we started out, 7 awards, just crazy, crazy stuff, culminating in one in 2018, wasn't it, which was the winner of the Next Money and Visa F18 Grand Finals.
Yep.
So really, really cool stuff. He's here to talk to us about what he's doing to make tech more accessible for everyone.
Thanks, Graham. Great. Hey guys, pleasure to be here. So my name's Evan Wong. I'm the CEO of Checkbox. And before I jump into what Checkbox does, I do want to give a quick kind of introduction as to what computational law is. I noticed that the schedule today has been heavily blockchain, but I think it's really important that we all appreciate what computational law has installed, as well as why it is actually very important for the legal industry. So I will give a kind of, computational law 101 introduction. So computational law isn't kind of the way that you find information. It's not about having, your legal databases like Westlaw or say LexisNexis. It's not that. Instead, it's about kind of industrializing, or it's about automating, digitizing legal expert judgment. So it's the ability to actually get to some sort of legal outcome through a system like an expert system, which is what I'll run through today as well. So a good example of this, an example that's actually often used is TurboTax. This is out in the US, but TurboTax is this piece of technology by Intuit, a big kind of accounting software company, that actually walks you through as a taxpayer. You put in your facts, it then, depending on what you put in, takes you down a specific path and spits out for you essentially all of your tax figures and then lodges the form for you as well. It's a very good example of computational law where you have a non-expert, someone who may not understand tax law very well, be guided through a piece of technology to get to some sort of legal outcome. Right? So that's kind of what computational law is about in essence. But let me give you an example, right? So computational law as well is a big shift, I think, in the way that lawyers think over the past few years. The main thing is that, and I was a law student at university. I graduated about 2 years ago from law school, and I jumped into startup instead of practicing. But what I learned from speaking to a lot of lawyers and having gone through a law degree myself is that lawyers like to think that a lot of their knowledge are tacit. It means that you kind of read a lot of case law, you immerse yourself in legislation, and then you kind of read a problem, you're like, I kind of feel like the answer is this. And often that's a lot of, and as you practice more and more, I think that becomes more and more second nature. And I think a lot of lawyers actually will resist the fact that a lot of legal can be distilled down to, rules. It is basic decision tree, that you can solve legal problems with some sort of method. And that's great, because the way that you digitize information, the way that computers understand human concepts is if there are rules in place. And a lot of people don't think law has that structure in place to be automated, but it does. Let me give you a very, very simple example. So my younger sister recently turned 18, but prior to that, there was always that thing where my mother would give my little sister a bit of, wine over dinner. My dad's like, oh, that's illegal, you can't do that, she's under 18. So let me walk you through this, right? If we take that example of, is it legal to supply a minor with alcohol, then you can actually really distill it down to a basic set of rules like this, right? So so that's kind of your kind of function. So if the person's age, which is kind of your variable, right, the person's age, is greater than 18, right? So what we have here, 3 elements here. We have the kind of function, the variables, and an operator greater than 18, right? And that number can change. It can be 21 in different states and stuff like that. Or the person's age is less than 18, and there's guardian authority, and there's responsible supervision, and then there's a negative condition, and it's not a licensed premise, then you have the legal outcome, right? So then the supply of alcohol is legal. And this is a very simple example, but this can be applied to a ridiculous amount of regulation, to legislation, right? Both government, private, and even internal policy. So computational law becomes extremely important because as the world gets more and more digitized, as lawyers and as students of, let's say, a few young faces here, it's really important to understand that we need to start to turn our attention to automating a lot of the work that we can automate so that we can spend our time on more high value, more strategic work. Because, and this is leading to why is it important? Well, as the world gets more and more inundated in regulation, right? There's more and more regulation nowadays. It kind of has the opposite effect. If you don't know what the regulation is, then that totally defeats the purpose of having it in the first place. If you don't know how to, obviously, what exists and how to obey it, then it totally defeats the purpose of regulation. So it's really important that we start to automate and make readily available the answers to these legal problems. And that's from a kind of broader public perspective, right? And on top of that, it's also about access to justice, right? So you imagine, and a very good example is this. I think about 2 years ago, there was this kind of Royal Commission around institutional abuse. This was a use case that Checkbox actually worked with, and I know I'm aware I haven't shown you what Checkbox is just yet, but I'll talk about the actual problem. You have all these, people who have been abused in schools or in institutions, and they then had to go and get a class action claim. But who do I go to? Am I even likely to get a claim? And I've been abused, and I don't really want to share those facts with a lawyer. What computational law allows is the creation of a system where victims of institutional abuse can actually go on, self-serve, answer a few questions, very similar to the tax example that I had earlier, but answering very sensitive questions, but privately, anonymously to a computer, and get to an outcome to say you are, this likely to be eligible, or maybe you're not likely to be eligible, and what are the next steps. And so this is a massive step, not only in being able to be more efficient with the law, but also access to justice for the general public. Now, if we move away from public, we're talking about, say, like law firms, right? We have big law firms with clients. Why is computational law important? Well, here's another example. Let's pretend you're a big global law firm, but you are predominantly Australian-based, right? A lot of your operations are in Australia. So when all of your lawyers go to sleep, your global clients might have a question pertaining to, say, the Foreign Investment Review Board, whether they have to make a lodgement for notification. What happens from their perspective is, well, they can't get access to advice because all the lawyers are asleep. And so what they can do is they can actually build out a solution that allows their clients to self-serve, to walk through a process and actually get to some sort of preliminary outcome. And this is really important for those law firms because it prevents their clients from going somewhere else and asking for that advice and potentially losing that client. And two, it's about creating a better customer experience. It's about always having that support in place. If you can automate and digitize legal advice, it means that you don't need to always engage the physical lawyer themselves, that you can actually get some sort of outcome immediately. And then, of course, it's really important for government, right? And I was already alluding to this at the beginning. Government, computational law is really important because, again, the purpose of regulation isn't to make us confused or feel stressed out about not understanding it. As the laws get more and more complex, trying to catch up with technological advancement, and it becomes, to the critical point where it's so difficult to actually keep up with it, it's really important that we start to let computers automate a lot of the types of regulation outcomes that we can do that. All right, so I've covered kind of what it is and why it's important. The last thing I'll do before I show the product is how do we actually deploy it, right? And there's two main ways you can deploy computational law. In fact, there's two types of computational law. The first type is code, computational law through code, and there's actually a session later on run by Guido from Data 61 on a thing. I won't steal his talk, but he's doing a thing on regulation as a platform, which is really cool, where you actually write regulation in the form of code, right? You write machine-readable legislation code, and so that the computers can automatically then go and understand that and execute the computational law. So I'll let Guido talk about that later on, so definitely tune into that. The other way, though, which is where Checkbox sits, is computational law without code. And this is a really, really cool concept. I'm super passionate about this, and I think it's very important to appreciate that lawyers and the legal industry are not traditionally a technology-savvy industry, but neither are accountants, neither are insurers or doctors, right? A lot of the professions that hold a lot of expertise don't come from a technology background. And so, as the world gets more and more automated, as the need for digitization increases, how do we, as lawyers in this profession, keep up with this trend? And I hear of talks of, all right, lawyers, we need to start teaching them how to code. All lawyers need to learn how to program. Okay. I disagree with that. It's good. I'm all for lawyers understanding and having that cross-disciplinary understanding of programming and technical. But I don't necessarily agree with that all lawyers need to learn how to program. Because there are, like I said, there's the root of coded computational law, but there's also the root that's emerging, and Checkbox is part of that, of no-code computational law. And so, for those of you sitting in the audience, if you don't come from a technical background and you are from the legal industry, and you're a little bit anxious, and that's totally cool. You're a little bit anxious because, oh no, I'm in a profession where technology is becoming the centerpiece of all these kind of conferences, all these talks, and I'm not particularly technical. That's fine. There are technologies like Checkbox, and we're not the only one, but there are technologies like Checkbox that are coming out that allow you to actually innovate and digitize without any sort of IT background. So I do want to share that with you now, the product. I will run through kind of a few brief slides to introduce you to what we do, and then I'll show you a live demo of the product itself, okay, to give you a real sense of what computational law can look like. So I'll use an example from our auditing friends, right? So we don't service just lawyers, we service kind of your big four accountancy firms and insurance companies and banks. Now I'll use an example from our good friend from the auditing firm. So this is a big four firm. They're looking at this piece of regulation. It's called the International Financial Reporting Standards. It's monolithic. It's huge. It's absolutely pages and pages worth of paragraphs and rules, and it's very, very timely because this year, this particular piece of regulation, IFRS 15, is rolled out. Right? And there's more to be rolled out. There's one called 16 coming out next year, and so on and so forth. So they took this regulation here, and their current process was to convert it into 50 Excel spreadsheets. Okay? These are accountants, they love their spreadsheets. They took a piece of regulation and they turned it into 50 Excel spreadsheets. I can hear a bit of snickering in the audience. Lawyers do this as well. We work with lawyers and they don't use spreadsheets, they hate spreadsheets. Instead, they use PowerPoint, right? You see Word docs, PowerPoint, emails, but they do the same thing. They take a piece of regulation. It looks like this, right? So each of those spreadsheets actually have each clause of the regulation in a cell, and then it has instructions to say, well, if you're this situation, or if you say yes to this question, go and read this other cell. And you're bouncing back and forth, and it's not even linear. It might then actually take you back to another spreadsheet, and you do this about 50. I'm not kidding you. This is their current. They do this 50 times and they end up at the outcome. And they say to their client, oh, this is actually, this is how you comply with the regulation. This is how they do it. Seriously, a massive global big four company. So what we did with them, we're working with them, and we transformed this process into this instead. It's a cloud-based solution that walks you through the regulation question by question. Depending on what you select, yes or no, particular drop-down, particular number, it will take you down one path of a specific decision tree. So it's kind of like a very smart, adaptive interface that actually serves you the next relevant question depending on your situation. So you never have to fill out those 50-page forms ever again. Those 50-page forms, only 3 of the pages really apply to you, right? And it says if you tick yes to this question, skip to question 9, and you're jumping all over the place. So now it only serves you the exact questions that are relevant to you. You can also build in guidance tips. So this is the ability to build in things like definitions. You can build in things like examples, ratio from case law, links to government website or your internal websites to provide help to go through the content on the left-hand side. So that if you're not an expert, you have that support to actually go through. You can put people's contact details in there as well, of course. And there's a comment box. So there's the ability to document your judgment as you go through, which is very important, obviously, in the use case of regulation where sometimes you'll say, I'm not too sure, but I click yes because of X reason. Right? It's not just yes, no's. Of course, we have form fields that allow you to input general information and also tables as well. So there's a spreadsheet-like interface that allows you to automate calculations in the background. So that's about being able to tackle things in insurance, in auditing, in tax law that have a lot of quantitative aspects. You can automate a lot of those using checkbox. And then at the very end, you end up at the transcript. So the transcript is like an audit log. It tracks all the questions you've been asked, your responses, and the comments you make along the way as well. So again, it's a completely transparent process. It can be reviewed across organizations, to an auditor, to government. And the beauty of it is you can generate a whole suite of these documents from the one run-through. So you can have one for your internal record keeping, one for the client, and perhaps one for the regulator. But it also generates completely bespoke documentation as well. So this is, the concept here is we're generating a report, but we've used this to generate things like NDAs. So if you can imagine a big bank, right? A big bank will have, excuse me, will have about 30,000 employees, but only 200 lawyers. So what happens is the 30,000 employees will be banging on the doors of the lawyers every single day, asking for NDAs and privacy policies, boring stuff, repetitive stuff. What the lawyers can do, or the compliance team within this bank can do, is actually take checkbox, automate the actual process in which you can generate an NDA, build the rules and the logic behind it, and at the very end, the users can self-serve at the desk and generate the bespoke NDAs without having to engage the lawyers ever again. It means that the lawyers can actually go and, like I said, focus on higher value adding work. And the beauty of it is that it actually lifts off the approval process. It's not just about generating an output, it's about lifting off the whole entire workflow, the whole entire approval process, because the document that's generated is compliant by design. The lawyers and the compliance team have designed it so it comes out perfect with policy, right, as opposed to against policy. So we've also used it to generate things like employment contracts, privacy policies, shareholders agreements, just anything that's really document-based, including letters of engagement and advice as well. So what you saw just then isn't actually Checkbox. You've got to remember that Checkbox instead is the platform that sits behind this. It's a platform that allows you to build solutions like the one you just saw without touching a single line of code. It's about building these computational law systems without coding. And the way we do that is we allow you to use drag and drop to convert legislation, standards, regulation, or policies internally into an end-user application that you can white label. So the government might white label this as saying New South Wales government, or a big law firm, say Ashurst, might white label it to say Ashurst and deliver it to their clients as their own product. And this is great because it not only plays a productivity game, where you can actually benefit from all the productivity factors that I talked about already with the bank example, but also from a revenue generating play. So these law firms are really, really engaged in not only being efficient. I mean, traditionally you're not really rewarded for being efficient as a lawyer, but I think with the fixed fee, obviously that's changing. But really, the law firms of today are really engaged in how do I get more matters, and how do I actually retain my existing clients and keep them sticky so that they'll come back for more matters. And Checkbox and systems like this are really good for that, because you can build a whole suite of self-service tools that you can put into, say, a portal, and your clients can then always self-serve and stay sticky, as well as generate new business as well by creating tools that they can actually self-assess. And then also, if you're really ambitious, what you can do is generate these kind of tools as a SaaS solution, as a software as a service, and then on-sell it, generating new streams of revenue. So that's the ability to, say, productize or commoditize some of your knowledge that you're comfortable, obviously, productizing as a lawyer, and actually selling that as a product, that knowledge, that expert knowledge, right? And so we do all of this through a drag and drop interface, which we call the studio. It looks like this, and the way that you change and introduce content is as simple as using drag and drop and rerouting the arrows to blocks. And at this stage, I'm going to show you a live demo. Rather than looking at the static slide, I'm going to go and jump into Checkbox and run you through maybe 1 or 2 examples, depending on the time. Okay? So I'll have to come over to my computer, so please excuse me. and I might have my back turned half the time. All right. So I only recently did a live demo for the first time at another legal conference the other day. What I got them to do, right, because it was my first time kind of doing a live demo at a conference, is I was like, I don't even know if this will work because it's my first time, so if it works, we're all going to clap for the platform. And we're going to do it again today just because I'm not sure if the internet here is stable. I literally just walked in and it just automatically connected, so we'll see how we go. All right, so what we're going to, yep, here we go. So what you're seeing here is essentially the author interface. The author is the person who builds the application for the end user to consume. And I'm going to show you a very basic example first. I'll show you the privacy policy generation tool, which is an example of how you can actually take a non-expert user, right? So, you know, I don't particularly know how to draft a privacy policy. As a non-expert user, I can walk through this tool and actually end up with a privacy policy for, say, my website. And then after this, I think, how many people here are aware of the NBD, the Notifiable Data Breach? You know what that is? Yes? Nice. And what about the GDPR in the EU? Yeah, nice. There's a whole bunch of, there's some people really excited about it. So there's basically these sets of data laws that have come into Australia on the 22nd of Feb. It's already in effect. Some organisations have been getting caught for it already. I might show you an example of that as well. So again, it's about allowing you to actually create a system that walks you through an assessment process to work out whether or not you need to actually lodge a notification for those purposes. But before I do that, I'll show you a document automation like tool. And then after that, I'll show you the actual assessment tool. So to show you how it works, this is the studio, and if I just zoom out for a second, what you see here in essence is the entire application. Right? All these blocks and arrows encapsulates an entire end-to-end computational law system. I can show you how it works. If I were to, say, introduce a new page into this system, I can drag in one of these blocks on the left. I'll just drag in a yes-no block for simplicity today. On the right-hand side, you see here there's the property editor. That allows me to change, obviously, features of that page. I'm going to change its header. I'm going to say that, let's call it initial question, right? And in the body, I'll say, are we all having fun today? Yeah. All right. So I'm going to add a tip as well, right? The tip, as we said before, is on-screen guidance. That allows you to provide definitions and help. We can say definition of fun, say, if you're smiling or laughing. Nice. I can tell that some people are having fun, good. All right, and I can add as many tips as I like. Let's just stick with one for now. And you can see what I can do here. You see there's a red dot and a green dot. They correspond to the yes button and no button. So if we are having fun, we can use this tool. This tool for people having fun. If you're not having fun, then sorry. You're not allowed to use this tool. We'll take you straight to the end. All right, and you can see here that this current block is actually red compared to the others, which are green. So that's because inside the studio we have a real-time validation engine. It actually detects errors as you build, so that as a lawyer who may be a little bit fumbly with logic and kind of the way you route things, you actually can build with confidence that every time that you make an error, the system actually catches you out on it. And we can actually see what that error is. If we click the bottom here, it tells me that the page is not reachable. Of course, nothing is connecting to that page. I can never get to it. And let's say I built a very, very big application on somewhere like, say, here, and I don't know where the error is. I can actually click on it, and it teleports me to that error, and I can obviously go and resolve the errors one by one. So I'll resolve it by just connecting up this start page. And there it is, no errors found. Great. So now I know that this is an error-free app. I can hit preview to see how it's coming along. So we can hit preview. So here's the privacy policy automation tool start screen. It's used to automate the generation of a privacy policy for a website, app, or both. I can hit the start screen, and there it is. Initial question, are we all having fun today? Definition of fun, if you're smiling or laughing. You can go and click yes, and it should take you to the starting form. Good stuff. Okay. I go back. And say in the comments, say, let's go and click no and say, no, I didn't get to eat enough at lunch. and we go no, it should take me to the end. That's it. So the end is the transcript. It tracks all the questions you've been asked, your responses, and the comments you make along the way. So as I said before, it means that it's completely auditable. It means that from a regulatory perspective, you've actually documented your analysis. There's evidence of a process, which is very important in certain use cases like, like the notifiable data breach, for example, to show evidence that you did go through a control process. But if I go back and jump you through right to the end, you'll get a feel of exactly how this works, right? So let's pretend we're doing one for, when in UTS and new UTS. To Ultimo Road, contact number, and I'll do myself. So Evan at uts.com.au. So now it says, is the privacy policy for UTS for a website, mobile application, or both? Has the ability to respond to the user's inputs, right? And that allows you to provide levels of personalization, but also it helps provide a layer of clarification. So a good example of this is, say, if you were doing the data breach scheme, you have the party that holds the information, the party who owns the information as well. And so if you're just referring to the word party or organization, it can get very confusing. So the ability to actually specify certain terms in the questions allow for clarification. And if I were to say we're building an application for UTS, it would then ask me, what is the name of your mobile application? But if I were to say, go back and say, no, I'm building a website, then of course the next question would be, what is the URL for your website? So this is kind of what I was talking about before, the smart form concept that responds to your inputs. So here we'll do uts.com.au. What personal information will you collect? So we can go name, contact details, and pretend we don't know what browser session means, so we can also check that. And it says includes geolocational data. So yep, we do track where they walk, right? Do you collect any other forms? So if you had another form that was not part of that exhaustive list, you can add additional items. So we can say yes, to show you an example, and we can say family members. We can go and add, I don't know, say pet names. Right. It's a weird website. And then we also want to use it for communication and for internal record keeping. Cool. All right, I'll just jump through some of these Google Analytics questions so we don't have to answer a whole bunch of side questions. And here's the transcript again with a lot more information filled in. And if we're happy with that, and if we're not, we can always go and amend it, but if we're happy with that, we hit complete project and it generates for us the bespoke privacy policy for UTS. It's for these pieces of personal information. You can see their family members and pet names. It's for a website, not an application or both. And for these uses. And this is your entire privacy policy that has been generated bespoke for you, ready to go. And you can go and obviously download this as well as a Word doc to allow for that kind of manual amendment afterwards if necessary. There you go. So this is just one example, and of course this kind of is very much in parallel with concepts around NDA generations, contracts and things like that. It's very much about running through a process as a non-expert. I have no idea how to draft a privacy policy. I've just put in my basic facts and requirements, and it's created for me the actual document ready to go. But if we're talking about computational law, then we really want to be talking about assessments and coming to some sort of conclusion. So let me just show you the notifiable data breach tool. Let me just, that's the one I just showed you. So just bear in mind that a tool like this, right? A tool like this, the privacy policy, took us about 2.5 hours to build after we had the content. And you compare that with kind of the speed that it takes traditional development, right? Traditional development, you'll have to build something like this, you'll engage a development team, whether it's in-house or external as an agency, and it'll take them weeks, if not months, to build something like this, and it'll cost you thousands and thousands of dollars. And here you're building it in 2.5 hours with a single subject matter expert, someone who really understands privacy policies, right? And the beauty of it is not just in the build, but also in the maintenance. Because the worst thing about software, and I know this because I work in a software company, it drives me nuts, the most simplest business logic changes, the most simple rules can have a dramatic technical implication. It's like, oh, I just want this number now to be 3, not 2. And it's like, okay, it'll take you an hour, right? No, it will take me 3 weeks. What? It's just changing it from 3 to 2, right? So this kind of stuff happens a lot, and it's very expensive, and it means that often you'll end up with a lot of legacy systems that lag behind changes in regulation or lagging behind changes in internal policy. So the power of a tool like this, because it is no code, is that you can actually go and amend the content whenever you like at no additional cost as a single subject matter expert without any sort of background in coding. So if I now show you the notifiable data breach, which is more of an assessment tool, we've partnered with LexisNexis around this one, and they're more than happy for us to show this. So I will show it to you. So LexisNexis partnered with us to build the notifiable data breach tool that walks you through, one, does the scheme apply to you? And two, if it does, do you need to lodge a notification? So that's how the tool looks like. It took us 1 day to build out this tool, and then we got them to test it, and they came back with feedback, and then it took us another day to refine it in total. And so this whole tool took us 2 days with UAT testing in between as well. And to show you how it works, let's jump through. So about, I don't know, maybe 10% of the room knew what this was, so I assume that the other 90% have no idea how to even navigate this. Now again, the beauty of it is that you don't even need to know what the notifiable data breach is, you just need to know when to do it. So you suspect that you've breached personal information. Let's say you work at an organization where you approve licenses for financial advisors. And what happened was you rejected an application, but you sent the email to the wrong John. It was 2 Johns in your inbox, and you sent it to the wrong John. So now the wrong John has the information of the other John, right? So that's a breach of personal information, and we, under this new scheme, have to potentially lodge a notification to an actual regulator, to both Johns and to the organization. So let's go and see if we need to do that. So here's a start screen. So name the organization that is being assessed. All right, let's just pretend I work again at UTS. All right, UTS, touch wood, but let's say they had a suspected breach. Does UTS hold personal information? And again, if we don't know what that is, it gives us guidance as to what personal information may entail. Yep, we had the individual's name, so yes. All right, now there's a whole bunch of pre-vetting questions around, reporting agency and health services. Obviously, UTS is none of these, so let's just click no for all of these. Use my touchscreen, it's faster. There it is, and we don't use the Telecoms Act. All right, so, oops, I think I might have accidentally clicked. Here we go. So let's go and say, we do have a record that contains personal information. We need to hold that first. Good. So now it says, is there a reason to suspect that they may have been a serious breach? So yes, we sent an email with someone else's information. And now it's asking, did the breach apply, before, on, or after the 22nd? And let's say we had it occur before the 22nd of Feb. Then it says that the notification is not required because it's not subject to the scheme, because it was before it came into effect. But you still should review UTS's policies, processes, and systems to prevent future breaches. If I go back and say select a date that's post 22nd, then it says the scheme does apply. Let's work out if a notification is required. So now we go through the test, right? So we say, was it lost? No, we still have information. Is it subject to authorized access? Yes, we had authorization. And is it subjected to unauthorized disclosure? Yes, we sent an email that wasn't meant to go to that person. So now it says, is it sensitive? Let's just say no. Was it encrypted? No, it was just an email. Was it sensitive or combination of personal information, financial information? Let's say it's financial, not about a young person, it wasn't publicly available, and it was just a single licensee. So now it says UTS must act quickly to ensure that the data breach would not result in serious harm. And it says, because of the steps that you took, is it no longer likely to result in serious harm? Now, if I say no, which means that it is a serious issue still, then it would take me to, obviously, the form that allows me to fill in the details to lodge directly to the Commission. So it's taking me to that form, and at the end, it will generate that actual form for you to lodge. I don't want to fill in a form today, so I'm just going to go back and click, yes, I fixed the issue. So I fixed the issue, and it tells you no requirement to notify the individuals or the Commission as well. Right, so we've gotten to a conclusion now, and if I go next, I can review those values through the transcript, and therefore have confidence that I've gone through an approved process that was written up by someone like LexisNexis, And so if I get in trouble in the future, I can say, well, I ran through this process, you know, and I did it for these reasons with all the documented judgment, and obviously that onus is then lifted off. At the very end, you even have, if we hit complete project, again, the kind of reporting that is provided by LexisNexis to say, in this particular case, there is no requirement to notify the individuals or the OAIC. So you can see here, this is a very good example of a computational law system where, as someone who knows nothing about the NDB, I could run through and get to some sort of legal outcome. It's really important for us in this room at the moment to look at all these examples and simply understand that these are examples, that you can actually apply this to a broad, a large number of use cases, whether it's internal policies or government or inside pure regulation use cases. Awesome stuff. All right, so with the small amount of time I have left, are there any questions from the audience? Because, yes, Jacob.
So very quickly, Evan.
Here, let's just get the mic in there.
Yeah. Thank you. So I noticed you mentioned that this program will provide legal advice. Would it be fair to say that it might be better to provide legal information rather than advice, considering that providing advice would attach fiduciary obligations?
That's a good question. And as a technology provider, we avoid that by saying that we only provide the tools at a technology level. We partner with organizations like LexisNexis, with your kind of law firms, who provide legal advice anyway, right? So they're just doing it in a much more digitized and streamlined way. A good way to think of it is, think about the law. The law started off not in writing, it started off verbal, right? It was kind of like a social, don't kill someone, it's bad, right? And then we decided to actually put it down in words, right? And the next step for us now is to go and take the words, which is how law is disseminated at the moment, and computerize it. So it's very much that transition. It's not about, not necessarily avoiding the delivery of legal advice, but actually enabling legal advice.
I suppose my question was more concerning where an element of discretion might be involved. And
right.
If a lawyer isn't going to be seeing the final product, you're moving the lawyer as easy.
Yeah, that's a good point. So again, you've got to understand that we're not necessarily automating or replacing all of the lawyer's role in any of these processes. This is about automating and streamlining all the processes that can be, all the black and whites, so that a lawyer at the end, even if it is a purely kind of automated process, will still be involved in the final review process. I'm definitely not saying that we're taking lawyers out of the equation. Thanks.
Any questions?
You've got a very nice interface. I'm reminded of there was a company called Ruleburst in Canberra. It was acquired by Oracle, I believe, that was doing a lot of work with the Australian government in coding regulation. So you sort of looked at what their capabilities are and what the competitive position is with respect to what they've got.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of Ruleburst specifically, but in terms of the kind of offerings that are available in the market at the moment, I think there is a distinction between, there's a lot of fine-grained distinctions, so some will be focusing mainly on document automation, some about kind of codifying business logic rules, but what we're achieving here is something that's quite different because we're marrying kind of the concept of form builders with spreadsheet, with decision tree mapping and document automation to get that kind of end-to-end digitization of a regulatory process. So whilst something like Ruleburst, and again, I don't know them very well, but might be focusing on, say, the business logic rules, they're not providing that kind of end-to-end implementation of almost like a digitization of a product or a business process.
You're relying upon some human analyst building this flow graph.
That's right.
The Ruleburst is based on logic programming rules, and it is some what are called abduction techniques in that area to actually, based on the information and how all of it is submitted, optimize, try to minimize the set of further questions that would be asked. It seems that in your system, you're always going to go through that flow graph in a particular order. independent of what the information is actually being handed in.
Yeah, that's right. So the idea though is that it's not so much, and so I think I kind of understand that instead of having certain factors eliminated as information is put in, we take a more route-based approach, where it's more of a process-driven approach as opposed to a goal-based approach. And that actually depends on the use cases. So there's some use cases that cannot actually follow a goal-based approach, in which case you would do a lot of that in checkbox. Again, I don't really know rule-based, to be honest, so I can't really give you a proper differentiation there. But yeah, I'd love to chat afterwards.
We've got 2 more questions here, so we're going to go here and then over here and then over there.
It's segueing from Miles.
Sure.
I worked 20 years ago in payroll awarding principles. And yeah, I'm interested in why in the legal fraternity, what's the business driver with the organisation? I'm not a lawyer. Listening to that and oh wow, I remember aspects of what's completely, but I've seen many aspects of what you've presented between HR, payroll, automation, CDIP, and award, people awarded and privilege, scores on the privilege.
Yep.
I implemented payroll and we went successfully. Fascinating as to what's driving the involvement.
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, computational law as a concept has been around for ages. It's not new. It's just that I think how technology and the internet has actually evolved to today has really enabled it to really happen at a commercial level. Why law now? I think there's a lot of pressures from many angles, particularly from clients. So a lot of law firms, their clients are demanding better fee structures. Like I mentioned in my presentation, the fixed fee structure. Previously lawyers would bill on the hour. It means that they get rewarded financially for being inefficient, whereas now with the fixed fee structure, quoting a single fee, they're forced to become more efficient with the way that they actually deliver advice. And if they're not playing that game, you have a lot of these what you call new law firms, as opposed to big law, who are doing this and therefore eating a lot of their lunch. And so they're forced to kind of start to automate and digitize these processes. There's a lot of pressures from clients from a fee perspective, but also from I see you no longer as just my legal advisor, I want you to also tell me about blockchain and how that's going to affect my business. So that's why they're diving in now.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask you if you could to cast your mind forward into the future and think about, is there a point in which computational law programs such as yours, I'm thinking of the Nota and things like that as well, right? Is there a point in which you guys are going to start to leverage, say, AI machine learning? Is there a point where the streams are going to cross, if you will, and what would that look like?
Totally agree. I mean, that's actually our vision and our strategy. So this really ties in really nicely into Guido's talk later on around regulation as a platform, or RAP. The idea, and he'll talk about this as well, which is RAP at the moment is a very good set of tools to interface with regulation in the code form. But you do need technologies like checkbox that act almost like the layer on top to actually go and have a user interface to actually make meaning of that set of logic. And so it is no doubt that there will be an intersection. I think the play that we're going with is that today this is faster to market in terms of commercialization. And so we've got kind of technologies like RAP, like AI and ML, we're keeping on top of that so that we get to the stage where we're in a very strong position with a core product to be able to integrate with a lot of that and with a lot of that kind of AI smarts. Yeah, so definitely I think that's seriously going to be what's going to happen in the future. Cool.
All right. Please.